Welcome and thank you for joining me. This is Laurie of Laurie's Heirloom Sewing. Today is Friday, April 3rd of 2020. So if you're in this same timeline, then you're aware of what's going on. It's getting harder to kind of, stay inside and not really go and do anything. I'm kind of a social butterfly, and I'm starting to find it a little bit more difficult than I actually thought it would be. But I've been keeping myself busy. I'm currently eating a chocolate chip cookie that I baked. That's one of the problems is I am a baker. I'm a person who bakes, sews, crafts, all sorts of things, paints, draws. Oh my gosh, I just do a lot of, kind of hands-on crafty things. This morning I started some sourdough starter. I decided, because I bake all of our bread anyway, and it's kind of gotten bad because I bake 2 loaves of bread it used to be I would bake 2 loaves of bread about every 4 days. And if we didn't eat all of it before it was time to bake the next 2 loaves of bread, I would either chop it up and freeze it for either breadcrumbs or croutons, or I would feed it to the birds. I don't think it's bad for them. I don't give them bread a whole lot, but the squirrels were eating it. I'm kind of bad that way. I am a feeder. I want to make sure that everybody's fed. So in any case, with us kind of tripping over each other during this event that we're currently living through, and the only reason I'm not saying it is because I don't know if I can. And I figure if you look at the date and it's the year 2020, then you know what I'm talking about. So it's a global thing. It's not like it only happened in Washington State or Alabama or whatever. It's global. So you know what I'm talking about. And then I just totally forgot what I was talking about. Tripping over each other because we're all having to stay inside. And with us home, basically 24/7, we're going through a lot more bread than we used to. And I'm not kidding. I've been making bread, like 2 loaves of bread every 2 days. Now, I will say I did just have to throw a small piece, the end of one out. It had gotten a little, it'd been in there a little bit too long. I keep my bread in a big metal bread container with a bamboo wood top. So, and then the bamboo lid comes off and you can use that as the cutting board to cut whatever size piece of bread you want. So, but anyway, I decided I wanted to try capturing some wild yeast and making some sourdough bread. So we're going to see how that goes. I used to make it, but then I also used to have a Dutch oven, and I no longer have a Dutch oven. So I'm kind of thinking, since I really can't go shopping and a Dutch oven isn't really an essential, I guess maybe they would have one at a hardware store, and currently, under the current timeline, hardware stores are still open. They are considered essential. So I suppose I don't know if I want to go out. I don't. So I think what I'm going to do is just try to bake it in like a regular pan or pot, an oven proof with a lid. I don't know. We'll see. But that's when you start your sourdough starter, it can take as the amount of time can vary from 2 days to full fermentation, all the way up to a week. And you have to feed it in between. So I started it this morning. So let's see, 24 hours. I will check it. If I have bubbling, then I'll go ahead and feed it and, do the whole discard feed thing. And then at that point, you let it go another 2 days, and then that's when you can discard and use. It's been a while since I've done sourdough, so I'll have to kind of go back and recheck my notes. But that's kind of where I'm headed with that. The human body can digest that wild yeast from a sourdough mixture a little bit better than, say, bread made with the active dry or instant yeast. So I'm going to see how that works out for us. And I also feel like sourdough bread is a little bit more on the hearty side. The bread recipe that I've been making, let's see, up until today, I've got 2 loaves of bread right now in the oven. The last 2 batches were what my grandmother on my father's side, my paternal grandmother, used to call depression bread. And it was basically your basic all-purpose flour and whatever you had. I mean, if you had all-purpose white, or if you had all-purpose wheat, or if you had a combination, you'd mix until you had whatever amount of flour you needed. She used to say a handful of salt, but basically what she meant was about a teaspoon. It was just she'd pour it, take it out of the little salt thing and put it in her hand, and it would be about a teaspoon of salt. And then 2.25 teaspoons of active dry yeast and 1 tablespoon of sugar. And her sugar would vary from whatever she had. If she had honey from her beehives, then she would use honey. If she had white sugar, she would use white sugar. Sometimes she'd use molasses. Whatever sugars she ended up using, it always tasted fantastic. So she really didn't start buying bread until she got, a little bit older. Like, when I say a little bit older, I mean like in her 70s. Her early 70s is when she started kind of buying bread. I think maybe when I was young, when I was like 3, I went and stayed with them because my mom was pregnant with my sister, and we had moved all the way from California, and my dad was in the middle of building a house, and my mom was like imminently going to be having this baby. And this was in Virginia. My dad worked for the federal government at that time, and so he had to drive to D.C., and we just decided to, my parents, I didn't have anything to do with it, decided to move to Virginia, because at that time, that was 100 billion years ago, and the traffic, the commute, everybody did it. We lived next door to people who were actually working, their place of employment was the Pentagon. So, and they lived literally right next door to us. So it was just common for people to live in that area and make that commute. But my grandparents lived in North Carolina. So my parents sent me down to to stay with my grandparents. Both sets lived within minutes of each other. So I could stay with my paternal grandparents for a little while, and then I would go stay with my maternal grandparents. And, it was just one of those kind of situations. I learned a lot of things, especially, like how to sew, when I was 3. I'm not making this up. That's what your grandparents did back then, What is go in the garden and pick this. Don't pick the cherries from the tree because they aren't ripe yet. Pick this because this is the right thing. I kind of remember making a mistake, but anyway, I think when I was staying with my paternal grandmother, at that point she did buy some bread, but only out of convenience. And then beyond that, it was always her homemade bread. And so anyway, the way you do it is you put all of your dry ingredients, and remember, sugar is a wet ingredient because it gets mixed in with your wet ingredients. It typically does not go in with your dry ingredients. So you would put your flour and your salt in a bowl and kind of whisk it together, and then add the yeast and whisk it together. And then you would have your sugar and about 2 cups of water. It kind of varies for me. I find with this particular recipe, there are times when I need a full 2 cups, and sometimes I don't quite need 2 full cups. It just depends. And then I just dissolve my white sugar or my honey in with this warm water. And what I do is I gauge it by my little pinky. Body temperature, if you're healthy, is like 98.7, 98.6, 98.8, somewhere in that range. So anything over that will feel warm. So if you are baking bread and the recipe says about 110 for the water temperature to either proof your yeast, depending on the yeast you're using, or if you're supposed to add warm water to the dry flour salt yeast mixture, as long as it feels warm to your little pinky, or this, kind of the side of your, like right in here, the side of your hand. That's what I use. A lot of people will use their wrist. That's good too. If it kind of feels warm, but it's like it almost could be too hot, that's perfect. If it hurts you, if you are touching and it's like, oh, that is way too hot, it'll kill the yeast. So I don't use it if it feels too hot. I just wait till it, till it cools off a little bit. And then I just slowly pour that in. I will say I've been using my KitchenAid because I hurt my wrist. I don't know what the heck I did, but I don't want to aggravate it by kneading a lot of, since I make all of our bread, I can break my KitchenAid, I just don't want to break me. So I just pour it into the bowl of my KitchenAid with it on low with a bread hook, and it makes up a beautiful batch of bread. So that's one of the things that I've been doing. The other is I've been sketching. So these are like every day I've been doing a sketch. I'm about to run out of paper, which I will have to deal with. So let's see, the first one that I did was, where did it go? Oh, I know. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. My sister's birthday is coming up, and I made her a bunch of things at the sewing machine. The first thing I made was the card that I was going to send her, and I decorated the envelope. This is the other card that I made, so there's that one. And then this was the second one, and this was the third, which isn't a card, obviously. And then I did the one with the little birds in the tree, and I wanted to do buttercups. And then I did bachelor's buttons, and then today I did tossed roses. So that's kind of where I am, what I've been doing. I really, for some strange reason, I cannot get into sewing. I desperately want to. I have a lot of sewing that I need to do, but I am struggling with getting into it. I've done a lot of sewing, but not the projects that I do for you guys. So I'm trying to get back into it. I think everybody is kind of going through this weird adjustment. I did hear today, we were kind of thinking that we might be on the back end of this, and that life would kind of maybe return to normal. That's not so much the case. As of this morning, I heard that it could be the end of April, and this is April 3rd. So I don't know, we need to do it to stay healthy, but at the same time, I'm not really sure how healthy the environment in the homes with a bunch of locked up people is. I feel fairly fortunate because I'm able to walk my dog 3 times a day just around my block, and that kind of clears my head. The issue with it is that I'm very cold-natured, and I don't like being cold, and for some reason this particular April feels more like January. It's so cold, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I had a pop-up on my phone yesterday that said we might get some snow. So, with all that's going on, I guess, okay, fine. Whatever. But anyway, I think there's a lot of happy dogs, happy cats, because all their people are home and have been for quite some time. I don't know. I mean, maybe we're just kind of going through a reset phase where we all have to kind of just start over. I'm not sure. If you're watching this from way far into the future, if this is still a thing, I hope that everything turned out okay and that we somehow managed to make things better for future generations. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this video, I know it was kind of weird and just you staring off into the distance there. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and I hope that I will kind of get my head reset and can get back into sewing. I'm really enjoying the pattern that we're working on. It's the this one right here, the Simplicity 8532, and my next planned idea is the sewing machine mat and cover. There are 2 things that I truly need. I mean, it is one thing, but I need to have a sewing machine cover and I need to have a sewing machine mat. So I may not be the only one that feels that way. The other thing that I'm working on that I have cut out is the scissors case, and I'm going to be working on the little, what do they call that thing? Scrap bag, or in the pattern instructions, scarp bag. So that whole little set right there, and the scissors case would be the next step. One of the videos preceding this one, which of course will get uploaded, is the pocket piece that I added a flanged top to instead of the binding. The binding would be sitting on top of the fabric, and the flanged edge is actually out. It's an encased, like if you were doing a ruffle. So it gets stitched inside like this. And then that's how I'm going to do all of this. Instead of binding the edges, the raw edges of this, I'm going to do a flanged edge like you would do on a pillow or something like that. Which changes, basically the whole size, the aspect, everything will be a little different. Because it will be poking out a little bit farther when you have it over the top of your sewing machine, it'll be out by that much, which I believe is an inch, slightly less than an inch, very slightly less than an inch. But that's because that's what I wanted to do, and that's one of the great things about sewing. You can truly change any of the steps. You can do whatever you want. You can experiment however you wish. And that's what I love, love, love about sewing. It allows you to be just as creative as you want. And if you don't want to change anything, you have, you know, absolutely every right to do it the way they tell you to do it. So anyway, that's the next thing, is that sewing machine cover and mat, the little scrap bag, and the sewing machine, or the scissors case. So I'm hoping soon. Anyway, as I'm rambling on, let me just say, have a wonderful Friday. I hope everybody is safe and happy. And if you have any questions about the bread recipe, how to do it, if you have any questions about any of the things that you've seen, this project here, these cards, basically the cards, I'll just tell you really quick, they are, obviously I'm using the paper that you use when you do a scrapbook, and it's left over from eons ago. It's not in the greatest of shape because it got moved and hauled around. So basically, to flatten it out, I just take this, my Omni Grid ruler, and I just kind of flatten it out. It takes a little bit of time and patience. This end is especially bad right here. They've all looked just as bad. I'm not kidding. They've all just been horrendous. But I have managed to flatten them out. Just spend a little bit of time. You know, and if it weren't, really, if it just wasn't a big deal, I would just order some paper. But I don't want to stress the people who are making these deliveries. You know, they're basically bringing us essential items, and I don't need to stress them out by having them, you know, bring me paper to sketch on. I'm just erasing some of the pencil marks from my colored pencils that got on here, and I can just incorporate these marks into the next design that I do. Like, here's some green. You know, you just make do with what you got. That's kind of where we are right now. We're just making do with what we got. So, anyway, thank you again so much for watching. I hope that your day is going well, and I hope it's warm wherever you are. I hope it's not too warm, but it's not cold either. Nobody likes to be cold. So I will see you the next time. Thank you again.